The political landscape across the globe is once again heating up, and all eyes are turning toward Asia, specifically, South Korea, where one of the most anticipated diplomatic meetings of the year is set to unfold. According to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, President Donald Trump is on track to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month. This encounter, expected to take place during the upcoming Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC summit, has already sent ripples through world markets, political circles, and the media. But what's truly at stake in this meeting? Why are analysts calling it a potential turning point in U.S.-China relations? And how did the world's two most powerful leaders find themselves back at the negotiation table in the middle of growing trade wars and geopolitical uncertainty? To understand the significance of this meeting, we have to look at the backdrop that led to it. Over the past few months, tensions between Washington and Beijing have escalated dramatically. China recently expanded export controls on rare earth materials, critical components used in everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to defense technologies. These materials are a backbone of the modern world, and China holds a near monopoly on their production. The move was widely seen as a direct response to Washington's renewed tariffs and restrictions on Chinese tech companies. In reaction, Trump didn't hold back. He announced the possibility of imposing 100% tariffs on Chinese imports beginning November 1, calling Beijing's policies an act of economic aggression. The result: global markets trembled, investors panicked. The S&P 500 saw one of its sharpest one-day drops in months, and commodities prices fluctuated wildly as the world tried to digest what might come next. Now, the news that Trump and Xi are planning to meet has brought a glimmer of hope, but also a wave of skepticism. On one hand, diplomatic talks between two superpowers are always better than silence. On the other, past meetings between Trump and Xi have shown that promises can be made and broken overnight. Many experts recall the 2018 trade talks and the temporary ceasefire that ultimately collapsed months later, leading to another round of tariffs and countermeasures. So, is this new meeting a genuine attempt at peace and cooperation, or just another high-stakes performance on the global stage? Scott Bessent, speaking to reporters earlier this week, tried to reassure both investors and the public. He confirmed that despite challenges and heated rhetoric, both Washington and Beijing remain committed to keeping communication channels open. He emphasized that President Trump sees the meeting as an opportunity to reset parts of the U.S.-China relationship, not just economically, but strategically. The idea, according to Bessent, is to explore areas where both nations can benefit from stability, especially amid a volatile global economy and ongoing regional conflicts in Europe and the Middle East. In his words, both nations understand the weight of this moment. It's not just about trade, it's about shaping the future of the global order. This meeting, expected to take place in Seoul, carries multiple layers of symbolism. South Korea is not only geographically positioned between two of Asia's biggest powers, but also politically caught in the middle of their rivalry. Hosting such a summit sends a message of neutrality and balance, something that could help calm rising regional tensions. For the United States, this is a chance for Trump to reassert America's influence in Asia after months of domestic turbulence, including the ongoing government shutdown and controversies surrounding his administration's decisions to downsize federal agencies. For China, it's a moment to show strength, resilience, and the willingness to engage diplomatically despite U.S. provocations. Behind the scenes, sources within the Treasury and State Departments have confirmed that several rounds of preliminary discussions are already underway between American and Chinese negotiators. These staff-level talks aim to prepare the groundwork for what could become a pivotal conversation between Trump and Xi. Issues on the agenda reportedly include trade restrictions, technology sharing, cybersecurity, and the use of artificial intelligence in defense. Both sides are treating carefully, aware that one misstep could unravel months of progress. But it's not just politics and trade that make this meeting significant. It's also about perception, how the world sees both leaders at this stage in their political journeys. Trump, returning to power after a controversial and polarizing election, faces pressure to prove that his foreign policy approach is more strategic than chaotic. Critics often accuse him of using international crises to distract from domestic problems, but his supporters argue that Trump's unpredictability gives the U.S. leverage in negotiations. Xi Jinping, meanwhile, is managing his own challenges. With China's economy facing slow growth and public frustration rising over strict regulations and limited freedoms, Xi must demonstrate that his leadership can keep China strong on the global stage. As both leaders prepare for this face-to-face meeting, global reactions have been mixed. European allies are watching closely, worried that another escalation in the U.S.-China trade war could destabilize international markets. Asian economies are particularly vulnerable, from Japan to Vietnam, as they rely heavily on both American imports and Chinese manufacturing. Economists warn that even a minor policy shift from either side could trigger ripple effects across global supply chains. Investors are calling this a make or break moment for 2025, one that could define the next decade of economic cooperation or confrontation. At this point, one thing is certain, the world will be watching. This isn't just a meeting between two presidents. It's a moment that could reshape global trade, alter alliances, and even influence the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific region. The stakes are high, the timing is tense, and both Trump and Xi know that every handshake, every word, and every camera flash will carry meaning far beyond Seoul's conference halls. So as the date approaches, anticipation continues to grow. Will this meeting bring a new chapter of diplomacy, or simply another round of political theater? The answer lies in how both leaders choose to use this rare opportunity, to mend bridges or to build walls even higher. To truly grasp the tension surrounding this upcoming meeting between President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping, we need to rewind and look at how the US-China trade war became one of the most defining conflicts of our time. What started years ago as a dispute over tariffs has now evolved into something much larger, a full-scale contest for economic supremacy, technological dominance, and political influence. And now, with Trump back in power and Xi facing growing challenges at home, the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just another policy disagreement, it's a global chess game where every move could tip the balance of world power. When Trump first introduced the idea of America First, during his previous presidency, it was more than a slogan, it was a declaration of intent. His administration accused China of unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and manipulating currency to gain economic advantage. In response, he imposed billions of dollars in tariffs on Chinese goods, sparking retaliation from Beijing. The result was a trade war that hit global markets hard, raising prices for consumers, shaking investor confidence, and forcing multinational companies to rethink their supply chains. By the time Trump left office, tensions were simmering but unresolved. Now, years later, the same issues have resurfaced, only this time under even more complex circumstances. China's recent decision to expand export controls on rare earth elements, materials essential to producing high-tech products like electric vehicles, semiconductors, and defense equipment, has reignited the conflict. These materials might sound obscure, but they power the world's most advanced technologies. Without them, production slows, innovation halts, and industries suffer. For the US, which depends heavily on imported rare earths, China's move was seen as a strategic strike, a message that Beijing still holds significant leverage. Trump's response was characteristically forceful. Within days, he threatened to impose 100% tariffs on all Chinese imports if the restrictions were not lifted. This tit-for-tat exchange set off alarm bells across Wall Street and major capitals worldwide. Financial markets responded immediately. The S&P 500 experienced one of its largest single-day drops in months, while Asian stock markets tumbled amid fears of another prolonged economic conflict. The US dollar strengthened as investors sought safety, but commodities like copper and aluminum, essential to global manufacturing, fell sharply. For ordinary people, these market shifts translate into higher prices for everyday goods, from smartphones and laptops to cars and household appliances. Economists warn that if the trade war intensifies further, inflation could spike again, eroding the economic progress made in the post-pandemic recovery years. Behind closed doors, however, not everything is as chaotic as it seems. According to insiders familiar with the situation, both nations have quietly kept communication channels open. Several rounds of lower-level negotiations have taken place between U.S. Treasury and Chinese Ministry of Commerce officials, exploring ways to prevent the dispute from spiraling out of control. Scott Bessent, in his recent press conference, revealed that Trump remains open to reasonable solutions that protect American interests while maintaining stability in global markets. His message was clear: the United States is willing to negotiate, but only from a position of strength. For Xi Jinping, the situation is equally complex. China's economy has been under pressure for months. The country is facing slowing growth, youth unemployment, and a real estate crisis that has eroded public confidence. At the same time, Xi's government is pushing an ambitious agenda of technological self-reliance, aiming to reduce dependence on foreign suppliers and build domestic capabilities in critical sectors like microchips, AI, and green energy. But that's easier said than done. Many of China's industries still rely on U.S. software design tools and semiconductor technologies. That dependency gives Washington a powerful hand to play. So, while Beijing projects confidence publicly, its leaders understand that a prolonged economic standoff with the U.S. could come at a heavy cost. Amid all this, the upcoming meeting in Seoul carries symbolic and strategic weight. Analysts describe it as a make-or-break moment, a chance for both sides to step back from the brink and re-establish a framework for cooperation, even if only temporary. Trump, known for his deal-making persona, is expected to frame the meeting as an opportunity to get a better deal for America, possibly leveraging tariff relief in exchange for concessions on technology or market access. Meanwhile, Xi will likely push for assurances that the US won't continue targeting Chinese companies through sanctions or trade bans. The challenge: neither leader wants to appear weak. In international politics, perception often matters more than reality. Trump supporters see him as a tough negotiator who refuses to back down, while his critics argue that his confrontational style risks alienating allies and destabilizing markets. For Xi, maintaining control over China's narrative is critical. State media have already framed the meeting as a diplomatic victory, a sign that the US recognizes China's growing global importance. But if the talks fail, Beijing could spin it as evidence of American hostility, further fueling nationalist sentiment at home. In short, both sides are walking a tightrope, balancing domestic expectations with global consequences. As anticipation builds, other nations are watching closely. US allies in Europe and Asia are wary of being caught in the crossfire. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and Australia have deep trade ties with both Washington and Beijing, making them especially vulnerable to disruptions. Global organizations like the IMF and World Bank have warned that renewed tensions could slow worldwide economic growth, disrupt supply chains, and drive up costs for critical technologies. Some experts even worry that economic friction could spill over into other arenas: cybersecurity, military posturing, or digital surveillance. So, while Besant's statement about the meeting has injected a bit of optimism into the conversation, the underlying reality remains deeply uncertain. A handshake between Trump and Xi might ease tensions temporarily, but without concrete policy shifts, the cycle of tariffs and retaliations could easily reignite. The global economy has grown too interconnected for either side to win this conflict outright. As one analyst put it, when giants fight, the ground beneath them shakes. And right now, the entire world is feeling those tremors. In essence, this is not just a battle of economics. It's a battle of ideologies. The United States champions open markets and democratic capitalism, while China promotes state-led development and political control. Both nations want to shape the 21st century on their terms, and as the countdown to the Seoul summit begins, the world waits to see whether Trump and Xi will build bridges or burn them down once again. As the world fixates on the headlines about the upcoming Trump-Xi meeting, what most people don't see is the intense behind-the-scenes diplomacy unfolding across Washington and Beijing. For weeks now, both nations have been quietly maneuvering, preparing strategies, drafting talking points, and testing the waters through back-channel communications. It's a political chess game being played by two of the most powerful leaders on Earth, and every move counts. Officially, the meeting in South Korea is being framed as a step toward dialogue and stability. But insiders know there's much more at play beneath the surface. Inside the White House, the atmosphere is a mix of determination and controlled chaos. President Trump, known for his unconventional style, reportedly wants to make this summit a defining moment of his renewed presidency. A Trump-style breakthrough. As one senior advisor described it, the goal is not only to strike a deal with Xi Jinping but also to project strength to the American public and the international community. According to multiple sources, Trump's inner circle, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and Chief of Staff Chris LaCivita, have been working around the clock to craft negotiation strategies that blend pressure with persuasion. Each word, each gesture, and each photograph from this meeting will be choreographed to send a message that America is once again leading from the front. Behind closed doors, Trump has reportedly emphasized one clear directive: we talk peace, but we don't show weakness. That phrase has become a mantra among his aides, reflecting the balance they're trying to achieve. The White House communication team is preparing a global media push to portray Trump as the dealmaker who can restore stability to international trade while holding China accountable for what he often calls decades of unfair practices. The administration knows that domestic politics will also be shaped by how this meeting is perceived. With the U.S. economy feeling the pressure from a government shutdown and fluctuating markets, a diplomatic success, even a symbolic one, could provide Trump a much-needed political boost. Meanwhile, across the Pacific in Beijing's Zhongnanhai compound, Xi Jinping and his top advisors are equally busy. China's leadership operates in near-total secrecy, but leaks from diplomatic channels suggest that Xi is treating the Seoul summit as a test of endurance. A chance to showcase China's steadiness and global maturity in contrast to what state media often describe as America's volatility. The Chinese government is carefully calibrating its approach. It wants to engage but not capitulate. Xi's advisors, many of them veterans of past trade negotiations, are crafting proposals that give the appearance of cooperation while protecting China's core interests. One such proposal reportedly includes relaxing export restrictions on certain rare earth materials in exchange for tariff relief on high-tech imports, a tactical compromise that could cool tensions without altering China's long-term strategy. At the same time, Xi's administration is facing its own internal pressures. China's economic slowdown has led to rising unemployment, shrinking private investment, and growing frustration among its urban middle class. The government has tried to contain this discontent through propaganda emphasizing national pride and resilience. China will not bow to external pressure, proclaimed a recent headline in the People's Daily, the Communist Party's official newspaper. But despite the tough rhetoric, Chinese policymakers are acutely aware that another prolonged trade war with the US could worsen domestic instability. That's why, behind the scenes, many within Xi's circle quietly support re-engagement, not as a concession but as a strategic pause. Diplomacy between Washington and Beijing is rarely straightforward. Both nations are known for their rigid negotiation styles, where even the smallest phrasing in a communique can take days to agree upon. According to diplomatic insiders, US and Chinese officials have already clashed over the wording of potential joint statements. The Americans want a clear commitment from China to ease export restrictions and increase transparency in tech trade, while the Chinese side insists that any deal must be framed as a mutual understanding, rather than a concession. It's a tug-of-war of semantics that reflects a deeper ideological divide. America's demand for open markets versus China's belief in state-controlled economic planning. Meanwhile, global reactions are pouring in. European leaders, particularly in France and Germany, have voiced cautious optimism. They hope a US-China thaw could stabilize global markets and ease the inflationary pressures that have plagued their economies since 2022. However, in the Indo-Pacific, reactions are mixed. Japan and Australia are skeptical of any long-term resolution, fearing that temporary diplomacy could be followed by renewed hostility once political optics are achieved. South Korea, hosting the summit, finds itself walking a delicate line, eager to showcase diplomatic leadership while avoiding becoming a pawn between two giants. Seoul has reportedly increased security measures around the APK venue, and is preparing for the world's media spotlight as the Trump-Xi summit approaches. What's especially fascinating is the personal dynamic between Trump and Xi, a mix of rivalry, respect, and unpredictability. The two leaders have met several times before, often exchanging both friendly gestures and sharp words. Trump has publicly called Xi brilliant man, but also accused him of exploiting the global trading system. Xi, in turn, has described Trump as a leader who speaks his mind, a carefully chosen phrase that reflects both caution and calculated respect. Analysts believe that their personal chemistry, or lack thereof, could play a decisive role in determining the outcome of the Seoul talks. If the atmosphere turns confrontational, progress could stall within minutes. But if both men find common ground, even a modest agreement could reset global expectations. And then there's the timing, something no diplomat takes lightly. This meeting is happening at a moment when both leaders face significant domestic challenges. Trump is battling criticism over the federal worker layoffs and the ongoing shutdown crisis, while Xi is under growing scrutiny for his handling of China's economy. Both leaders need a win. That mutual motivation could be the very thing that pushes them to strike a deal. Or conversely, it could make compromise harder if either side feels cornered. As the summit draws near, intelligence agencies, global investors, and media outlets are watching for every sign, every clue that could hint at what's to come. Private jets carrying negotiators and advisors are expected to land in Seoul days before the official meeting. Security will be tight and secrecy will be paramount. Behind the polished smiles and diplomatic handshakes, a silent battle of nerves and negotiation will unfold, a contest not just of policies but of wills. So, while the headlines focus on optimism and diplomacy, those who understand geopolitics know the real game is happening far away from the cameras. It's a contest between two systems, two worldviews, and two leaders who both believe they're destined to shape the future. Whether this meeting becomes a milestone for peace or a missed opportunity will depend not on what's said publicly, but on what's agreed upon in those private, unrecorded moments behind closed doors. As the world inches closer to the historic Trump-Xi meeting in South Korea, anticipation has reached fever pitch. Every analyst, investor, and policymaker is bracing for what could be one of the most defining moments in modern diplomacy. The global stage is set, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just another bilateral meeting, it's a confrontation between two ideologies, two economic superpowers, and two leaders whose decisions could reshape the balance of global power for decades to come. Both Trump and Xi know that what happens in Seoul won't just influence headlines for a week. It could determine the political and economic direction of the entire world. According to Scott Bessent, one of the key figures close to the Trump administration, this meeting is not about small talk or photo ops. It's about rewriting the rules of engagement. His remarks have fueled speculation that something far deeper is being planned behind the scenes. Possibly a new framework for trade, security, or even technology cooperation. Insiders suggest that the U.S. team, led by Bessent and top economic advisors, is preparing to propose a phased reduction in tariffs in exchange for stricter compliance on intellectual property protections and manufacturing transparency. Such a deal, if successful, could calm global markets that have been rattled by years of tariff battles and economic uncertainty. But diplomacy rarely unfolds smoothly. There are still massive trust issues between Washington and Beijing. For Trump, the challenge is convincing Xi that America's outreach isn't just a temporary tactic but part of a long-term strategy to restore fair trade. For Xi, the challenge is maintaining face domestically, showing strength without appearing submissive to American pressure. Both leaders are walking a tightrope, balancing internal politics with international optics. And in politics, perception is power. The slightest sign of weakness could send shockwaves through their domestic audiences and global markets alike. Economists are already running simulations to predict the possible outcomes of the Seoul summit. In the best-case scenario, both leaders agree to a limited trade pact that includes easing tariffs, restoring technology exchanges, and setting a framework for future cooperation. Such an agreement could instantly lift investor confidence, strengthen the dollar, and stabilize commodity prices. On the other hand, if talks collapse, or if either side walks out without progress, the consequences could be dire. The global markets could spiral again and tensions in the Indo-Pacific might flare up, particularly around Taiwan and the South China Sea. The geopolitical ripple effect would be felt from Wall Street to Shanghai, from London to Sydney. Beyond economics, there's a growing realization that this meeting could mark a shift in global alliances. Some analysts believe that if the US and China can find common ground, it might isolate Russia further and reshape power structures in Asia. Others fear that too much cooperation could alienate America's allies in Japan and Europe, who have long been wary of Beijing's growing influence. It's a delicate balancing act, one that requires Trump's deal-making instincts and Xi's strategic patience to work in harmony, at least for the cameras. Yet, beneath the surface, every handshake and every smile will be carefully measured for meaning. Interestingly, both nations' media are crafting very different narratives. In the US, conservative outlets are portraying Trump's initiative as a sign of strong leadership. Return to America first, through diplomacy instead of confrontation. Meanwhile, Chinese state media is emphasizing Xi's wisdom and calm, suggesting that China's steady hand is guiding global peace. The contrast is striking: two nations, two stories, and two very different audiences. Yet both narratives serve the same purpose, reinforcing the strength of their leaders ahead of domestic challenges. As the meeting date approaches, security preparations in Seoul have intensified dramatically. Local authorities have declared a high alert zone around the summit venue. Military presence, cyber defense units, and international intelligence cooperation are all in play. The South Korean government has even established a real-time monitoring center to coordinate communications with both Washington and Beijing. For the people of Seoul, this meeting is both an honor and a burden. The city has become the center of the world's attention, even as the risk of protests and political friction looms. But what exactly does the world expect from this meeting? Global think tanks are divided. The Atlantic Council predicts a symbolic reset, where both sides agree to resume dialogue without committing to any concrete policy. The Brookings Institution, however, believes that Trump might push for a short-term trade deal designed to boost U.S. markets before the next election cycle. Meanwhile, China's own strategists, especially those close to the Politburo Standing Committee, see the meeting as a test of U.S. sincerity. They believe that Trump's unpredictable style could be both an opportunity and a risk. As one Beijing insider reportedly said, Trump negotiates like a businessman, he wants visible wins. Xi negotiates like a strategist, he thinks in decades. And that's what makes this meeting so fascinating. It's not just about politics or economics. It's about philosophy. Two worldviews are colliding, one rooted in capitalist individualism and the other in collective state power. Trump's America believes in competition and innovation, while Xi's China believes in long-term planning and social control. Yet both leaders are facing remarkably similar challenges: aging populations, rising economic inequality, and increasing public pressure. In many ways, they are reflections of each other. Powerful, ambitious, and unafraid to bend the global order to their will. As the cameras flash and the translators prepare, the world holds its breath. Will this be a turning point for global peace and cooperation, or just another episode in a long saga of rivalry and mistrust? History has seen many such moments, from Nixon's meeting with Mao in 1972 to Reagan's summit with Gorbachev in the 1980s. Each meeting changed the course of world events. The Trump-Xi summit in South Korea could very well join that list, or fade into history as another missed chance for understanding. And when the final press conference concludes, when both leaders board their jets back home, the world will begin dissecting every sentence, every expression, every handshake. Because sometimes, the real story isn't in what's said. It's in what's not said. The silences between the words often reveal more than any statement could. So as the lights dim in Seoul and the cameras turn off, one question will echo around the world. Did this meeting bring us closer to peace? Or just deeper into the illusion of it? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. The world is watching, and history is about to be written. This was today's Global Update, a story of power, politics, and possibility. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay tuned as we bring you the truth behind the headlines, every single day.